Welcome, folks, to the latest crazy and live broadcast of One Patriots Place, brought to you by e2gsports.com. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, thank you for downloading. On the mics today, you will find Steve Balistreri. That way. Thomas Murphy. Myself, Claire Cooper. And joining us, as you can see, the uber hardworking writer and host for 98.5 The Sports Hub, it is the lovely Alex Bath. Welcome back, Alex. Thanks for joining us. How are things with you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. A little weird, you kind of grind on, and I know there's still football, but you grind on the Patriots season for so many months, and then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and there's no press conferences to get up for, there's no practice to go to, there's no matchups to work on, there's no tape to watch. So I guess I'm at the time of year where I fill that void with the draft. But it really, I don't know for everybody else, and I felt this way before I covered the team, even as a fan, that like first week when they're out, not even necessarily the playoffs being over, that's a whole other end. But that first week when they're out is it's really weird.
It's weird. My DMs are filled with, "Hey, Murph, my mornings are open if you're podcasting." It's fantastic. Alex, thanks for being here with us. Yeah, it's really nice to be for you guys to be able to sleep in a little bit, catch up with the family that rarely sees you, go get the haircut and everything else that normal people do during the season that you're not able to. Jump right into it, but a lot of talk is being bandied about this week as to, all right, the Patriots took this step, where to go to next. My opinion is to get some more cap room. What do you think?
Yeah, so in terms of immediate steps, so you're talking about like the next couple weeks, not like free agency. Yeah, the cap number right now, I think, what does our friend Miguel have it at? I think it's like 2.5, something like that, somewhere between 2.5, 3.5. That's not enough space, obviously. Me and Evan had him on the Patriots Beat podcast last week. You can check that out on the Patriots Beat YouTube channel. He said that number realistically, they can realistically, with minimal effort, get that number anywhere between 30 and 40 million. And that's between signing some guys to extensions, restructuring contracts. There's a couple guys that can release. So I'm not like, I've seen people and I've heard from people that, oh, what are they going to do? They already are out all these free agents and they only have 2 million in cap. Like that can all get, it's not what they had last year, right? They had 100 something, 200 something million last year, but you don't have that much cap every single year. Nobody does. That's not how it works. But the thing is, they spent all that money last year. They have a lot less needs to fill. I see some people talking about they need to overhaul the whole roster. I don't think that's the case.
Right.
I think they need, it's more about targeted additions this offseason. Can't do that with 2 million, but if they can get to that 30 to 40 million range and then use the draft to kind of help fill things in, they should be able to do what they need to do this offseason.
I agree.
Well, here's the big question. Does J.C. Jackson get franchised this spring?
I would be shocked if he doesn't. Unless, I mean, look, maybe they agree to a long-term deal first, but he's not leaving. First of all, they don't have anybody behind him.
Right.
Your top two corners, if he leaves, are Jalen Mills, who, as good as he played last year, is best used in multiple roles. I kind of like him how they had Jason McCourty his last couple of years here, where sometimes he's an outside corner, sometimes he's a safety. So your top two corners, if JC leaves, are Jalen Mills and Juwan Williams. You want to go down that road. If the thing with the tag is he's probably going to push a $20 million AAV. I've seen his value estimated at $20.9 million on like a 5-year deal. And that's pushing what Jalen Ramsey got, which in Ramsey's the highest paid corner in football right now. He may reset the market just with inflation. The tag it's projected to be anywhere from, I've seen 17.2 to 17.5.
Yeah.
Right. So right there, you're saving $3 million. Like you're getting it for $3 million under value if you tag him. Now, the flip side of that is the tag is all cap. So I talked about, I said anywhere between 30 and 40, we'll use 35. If you tag him at 17 and the cap's 35 million, you just used half your cap space. So there's incentive to work on an actual contract with him because the franchise tag's all guaranteed. It's all capped. A contract extension won't necessarily be that way. There's signing bonuses. There's contract incentives, et cetera, et cetera. So I think they tag him just to buy that time. And we've seen them do this before. We've seen a lot of teams do this before. You tag them, and then there's however long the window is, I forget. But you tag him, and there's a window where you can continue to negotiate with him without him hitting free agency. I think that has to be the plan. They can't let him walk. I don't think they're going to jump right into a long-term deal. I think they might find one, but I don't think they do it quickly. So that's what I think is happening. I would be very, very, very surprised if he doesn't get tagged at some point in this process.
Yeah, you think they can work something out long-term with him before training camp?
That's going to be tough. I think now you're getting into the tougher question because they've been hesitant to pay corners in the past. And the thing with J.C. Jackson, I've used this. I don't remember if I used this analogy on this show. I think I might have. The starting pitcher analogy, right? So in baseball, when you have starting pitchers, you have number one starters and you have aces. And not every ace is a number one starter. Not every number one starter is an ace. You might have a team with multiple aces. You might have a team like, for instance, Eduardo Rodriguez was the Red Sox number one starter. And he's a pretty good number one starter a couple years ago, but he wasn't an ace, right?
Nope.
So I look at corners the same way. J.C. Jackson, to me, is a number one corner, undoubtedly. And that, to me, basically means he's one of the 32 best corners in the league. Is he an ace? He's like right. He's right on that border for me. Here's the thing. If he had stopped Diggs in either of those two games, I would say he's an ace. I was waiting for that.
But he didn't.
But he didn't. You're right. So are they going to pay? And he's 25. So he's still getting better. The average athletic peak in the NFL is 29 years old. So in theory, he still has 4 years of progression. Right. And how much progression that is, it might be, it's more minimal as you get closer to 29. And not every player is going to peak at 29. But are they going to pay a guy who may not be an ace money? Nope. And I look at what they did. So if you go back a couple years, right, and they had Rivas and they had Butler, and Rivas was an ace. Rivas unquestionably an ace. Nobody's going to debate that. And Butler was kind of like Jackson. He was close. He was the top 15 corner in the game. Locked down Antonio Brown a couple times. But was he an ace, right? And we didn't know. And so what did they choose to do? They let the ace walk. They strung Butler along with team control. So it was RFA tag, franchise. I forget the exact tags they did, right? But it was these 1 year things that he couldn't really negotiate.
Transition.
And then transition tag. That's the term I was looking for. Thank you.
Sorry.
And then, no, you're good. And then when they had a chance to go out and get that ace, Stephon Gilmore, they got their ace. So I look at that again, and now Gilmore is Rivas, right, in that scenario, and Jackson is Butler, and it's, well, they can't let him go, but are they just going to string him along until they can get that true ace? And who knows what's going to happen with contract extensions, but next year's free agency class, like 2023, is projected to be loaded at cornerback.
Yeah.
So that, if it wasn't for the cap issue, I would think they would just franchise him and be done with it. The fact that they can't really afford to pay him $17 million makes it more complicated. But I'm a big proponent when you look at the Patriots of, as much as what people want to call Bill Belichick unpredictable, if you do anything for 20-something years,
right,
there's going to be patterns. Everybody has tendencies. So I'm a big proponent of, okay, can we find a similar situation in the past, and how did they handle it then? So that's how I view Jackson. Is I think that's somewhat of a comp. It's a little different, and I think he's more likely to get an extension than Butler ever was. But this is how they've handled it in the past.
Well, Claire, there's the first question for you.
Right?
Seriously, we're really going to do this one.
We're really going to do this one.
We're really going to do this. Oh, great. Okay, so how much cap room would I use to re-sign Izzo? Well, you wouldn't have to use much because he didn't actually take much, did he? He was on, what was it, 850,000. So, he wouldn't take much of it. So, not much of it, but I'd use some of it. So we all know that. That's
the way the offseason. The way the offseason works, so teams can keep 90 players on their roster with that cap, it's something called the top 51 rule. only your 51 highest paid players count against the cap
Right.
during the off. So from March 1st to final roster cuts. So if they re-signed Izzo, is he going to be one of the 51 highest paid players on the roster?
Nope.
Probably not. So he actually counts nothing against the cap unless he makes the team. And if Ryan Izzo finds a way to make the team, we have bigger issues to worry about the 800,000 in salary cap that he's going to be taking up.
Thank you for
Barth
sorting
went
that
there.
out, Alex. Thank you
Barth
so
went
much for
there.
sorting that out. And then you just, at the very, very end, you just secured your fate of never returning to the show.
Wow.
Well, no,
bravo.
it could be bigger issues in how did he get so good all of a sudden? Does he need to take a drug test or something like that?
I'm shocked. I'm leaving now.
That's it.
Well, here's another question for you. This is for our guest, of course, but from Joel Shapiro, do you think the Patriots look to replace Hightower with a vet, free agency, or through the draft?
Yeah, so this is a really tricky one because there's a ton of variables here. First and foremost, Juwan Bentley's a pending free agent too, right?
Right.
And I think if Bentley has another year on his deal, in and out, like that's a no-brainer.
Yep.
But Bentley's going to want money. Bentley probably commands more money on the open market than Hightower. So if they pay Bentley, that kind of is their replacement. That's their big move at linebacker, right? If Bentley leaves, and here's the other side of this, are they still invested in that 260-pound downhill only run-stopping linebacker? Like, I love that kind of player. Don't get me wrong. But I think we've seen here in the last couple of games that maybe that player, you don't need such an investment in that player. The other thing is, replacing Hightower is not just on the field, it's a leadership role. So to me, it's less about replacing Hightower and more, I'd love to see him back on short money, which does he really want to go somewhere else at this point in his career? I'd love to see him back on short money and then not necessarily replace Hightower, but find a different kind of player. Everybody's drooling over Nakobe Dean in the draft from Georgia. Yeah. I think he's going to be off the board. Like, great player. I'm just not going to get my hopes up. I'm not going to spend that much time on him.
He's gone top 15.
But he had a guy who played next to him at Georgia who's a very similar player who for some reason nobody's paying attention to. That's Quay Walker,
right?
Who is slightly bigger. Like, he's 240. So here's the way I look at it. I don't think the Patriots are all of a sudden going to go after these 220-pound 4 or 5 running linebackers. They're like the people who think that that's what they need to do. They're not going to transition that hard. It's just not how it works. What you need to do, if you want to try to figure out the guy, is who are the 240-pound linebackers, 245-pound linebackers that are the most athletic, that are going to run at least a 4.8, something like that. That to me is Quay Walker. He's the compromise in that. And that's probably discrediting him to call him a compromise because he's a very, very, very good football player.
Alex, where does Cam McGrone fit into this?
Yeah, and Cam McGrone's part of it too. Look, I struggle to pencil in any player coming off that kind of injury, right? Or I struggle to Sharpie, and I'll pencil him in. I think he's part of it. I think he's part of the equation, but he hasn't played football in over a year. So it's hard to know what you're going to get from him. And the reality is they like to cycle their linebackers too. So you probably need more than one guy like that. Sure. I think if you could pair a guy like Walker with McGrone, I think that could be very effective. So I think Cameron McGrone's going to be a name we're going to hear a lot this offseason, into OTAs, into training camp, and rightfully so. But
McMillan
I think
too.
McMillan, yeah, hopefully. I mean, I was so super high on him. He's not necessarily the athlete that McGrone is, at least was before his injury, that Walker is, but he compared to like Hightower and Bentley. Yeah. So they have some of these guys, but I sit with McMillan, there's concerns. He's been hurt the majority of his career. With McGrone, there's concerns. He's coming off a torn ACL. I think if you get 3 of those guys, 2 of them pan out, you're in good shape. It's a numbers game. So again, the thing about like Quay Walker versus Nakobe Dean, you got to use your first round pick to get Nakobe Dean. You might have to trade up to get him. Right now, and things can change, right now you might be able to get Quay Walker early day 3. Ooh. Like late day 2 for sure, maybe early day 3. So, it's all asset management. Is linebacker such a big need that you want to invest in it in that sense? Well, you do have Cameron McGrone and you do have Raekwon McMillan. So maybe not. Whereas if, cornerback or tackle,
yep,
I'd be more inclined to use a first round pick there. Troy Anderson, that's a really good comment. Troy Anderson from Montana State I haven't watched a ton of Damon Lewis. I know he kind of fits that category, but I have watched Troy Anderson. That's another guy. He's probably more second, third round than third, fourth round. But yeah, Troy Anderson's another guy who fits that mold, who again he's a quicker linebacker, but he's not one of these guys who's basically a safety. He's going to give them some sort of size, some sort of run stopping ability in the box.
That was a great freaking pull there, buddy. Buddy E2G, our boss, is sitting in the chat room enjoying.
Yeah, I mean the Montana State. Is he from Montana? The Montana State pull's a tough one. That's a big one.
Yeah, no. But Buddy is like us, man. He lives in the draft prep bubble. You know that you know, 3 of the 4 of us in here. Claire's sitting there saying, I don't know. Claire, go ahead. What's your next one?
I don't get college football, so I kind of like,
Oh, it's all right.
Really
College, I've said for years, college football only exists to give me game film to study for the draft. That's it.
It's so much fun. Here's the thing. Everybody's drooling over what last weekend was, right? And they're great games. It's like an above average Saturday in college football. If you want that kind of chaos, you can't beat college football. It's so good.
Oh, it's not that I don't want to watch it. I don't have much access over here, so I don't get a chance to.
Right.
So
that's
it's
fair.
less about want and more about availability. So I know obviously the off season is now going to be quite a long one for us because the Patriots off season has technically started. So I know that we're going to delve into the draft and stuff like that probably quite significantly. So I wanted to ask you really about the season that we have just had. I mean, 10-7, the Patriots made the playoffs. Do you consider the season a success? And if not, why?
So I think, and this is a question I kind of gone back and forth on a lot. It's a success, but it's a disappointment. So I don't think that those two are mutually exclusive. I think the opposite of success is failure. It wasn't a failure. It was a success.
No.
But to have the number 1 seed as late as they did, to lead the division as late as they did, to get beat twice by one team within a month, regardless of that team's the Bills or not, it's disappointing. And, you know, I look at it as it's a 4-year window, really. You know, I think a 4 to 5 year window for this core they put together this last offseason to win a title. And I think it's a good core. And look, if 10-7 in 2000, right, the early dynasty Patriots, their foundational year was 2000. They won 5 games. They went on to win 3 Super Bowls. So, you know, a 10-win foundation feels really good. The thing is, it's not a guarantee of anything, right? I look at, like, this can go one of 2 ways. 10-7 is a great foundation. The roster needed so much help. They weren't going to be able to fix everything in one offseason. You go out this year, next year, you round out those pieces. You get a big playmaking receiver. You get another corner. You get that linebacker. You're probably going to have to replace Devin McCourty at some point in there. Those are really the big ones. You do all that, and all right, you know, next year you take another step, and then years 3 and 4, you should be a bona fide title contender. That's the way I look at it. And they get there. And if they get there, we look back on 2021, and I think we say, yeah, it hurt, but, you know, they needed to lose to win. I'm a big proponent of that. I think you need to learn to lose to win at that high of a level. Something I love, and it's a very minor kind of out of nowhere reference, but in 2014, the Kansas City Royals, who were a young upstart team that kind of got to the World Series out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with this?
Yep.
The Kansas City Royals lost the World Series in 2014 to a better San Francisco Giants team. And the majority of the roster stayed on the field to watch the celebration after the World Series ended. The next year, the Royals came back and they won the World Series. And look, that's not like a guarantee. It's not watching. We know because Diggs watched the Chiefs celebration last year, and that clearly didn't help him this year. But I think there's something to that. You know, I look at that last game. That needs to be internalized.
And Barrymore.
And I think, you know, it's so jarring. It's going to be internalized. Barmore was watching it, right? Yeah. I think it is going to – a game like that's internalized one way or the other. It's what do you do with it? If I'm Bill or I'm one of these coaches or I'm one of these leaders on this team, first day of meetings in the spring before anything else, hey, guys, we're going to watch a video, and it's going to be highlights from that game. I want you know, in my style of leadership, at least, how I'm motivated, I would want people to watch that and see that. And, hey, this is the standard we set last year. Yep. This is what happens with the standard we set. That standard needs to be higher. So not saying that the team has a bad standard or anything like that. It's just that, you know, I think that's a source of motivation. Anyway, my point being, one of two things can happen from and it's a good foundation. One of two things can happen from this foundation. Either that was either they use that and they build on it, and that's pushing them, and it's motivational, it's a learning point, and it propels them to a title. Great. That's how you draw it up. Mm-hmm. The reality is there's 32 teams in the league. They're all operating on 4-year windows. They all can't win a title every 4 years. The flip side of it is basically what the Boston Celtics are, where they probably overexceeded early.
Yep.
They got complacent, and they never took that next. They never had that push. They never took that next step they needed to take.
They believe their own.
So that's right. That's the flip side of it. If they come out next year and they got 9 wins at Thanksgiving and then they finish with 10 or 11, that might tell you who this team is. But I just, with Bill Belichick in that room, with Devin McCourty hopefully staying in that room, Donta Hightower hopefully staying in that room, I've kind of comes to terms with the fact that Matthew Slater is probably going to retire, but I throw him in that group as well. I don't think that's who this team is. I don't think they have that. I don't think that's their DNA. I think they can use this and build on it. So again, I think it's a success. They checked every box they needed to check. They were competitive again. They were somewhat more resistant on defense. I know it didn't look like it at the end of the year, but they were the second-ranked defense in the league, all things said and done. They found the quarterback. And he might not be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, but he's an NFL caliber quarterback. We'll find out to what caliber, I think, next year. I can't comment on that. Never saw Steve Krogan play, but he's not wearing a neck roll, so how can he be Steve Krogan? They checked all the boxes. It was a success. It's just disappointing the way it ended.
I have a follow-up before we go to that question, Steve, that you just put up. I do have a follow-up, though. So what I want to ask you, Alex, is what do you think the Patriots could have or should have done differently this season?
I think the big one, and look, this isn't groundbreaking information. Phil Perry's reported this. Evan Lazar's reported this. 2 guys that I know you are all very high on, so you'll take this as gospel. The chain of communication on the defensive side of the ball.
Thank you.
From the coaches wasn't great. And that's not to say that there was drama or it's finger pointing or anything like that. I think when you have one guy, right. I think when you have one person, and they might not have even known how confusing it was, but I think when you have one guy telling you what to do on Tuesday, another guy telling you what to do on Wednesday, another guy telling you what to do on Thursday, on and on and on, wires are going to get crossed. Right. Just, who the guy should be. We can debate that, whether it's Steve, whether it's Gerard, whether it should be Bill, whether it's Bill, whether it's Patricia, whether it's somebody they bring in from the outside. Give me an organizational flow chart. Give me one guy at the top and everybody branching down from him. I just think that's what it needs to be. Too many cooks is a perfect way to put it. There's other things, other issues they had down the stretch. I thought the physicality dropped off. That was their hallmark early on. And then they start getting bullied left and right. But I think the defensive coaching arrangement hasn't been great. They've gotten by with it, but I haven't loved that arrangement for the last couple of years. And I think you saw it come to a head there in the last month. So I know Bill's hesitant to give out that title, but unless it's him doing it, there needs to be a defined defensive coordinator next year.
I agree.
I think
the question we got for you, Alex, was from Ben again. And he said, I had it up on the screen, but it was so long it kind of blocked you out. With Stidham not showing much promise, Hoyer not offering much of a rebuild, would you rather the Patriots draft another young quarterback in the later rounds or look for a good value quarterback in the free agent market? I guess ostensibly he's meaning as a backup to Jones.
Yeah, I flirted with this idea. I think having somewhat of a long-term backup is important. Now, it's not the issue they had, it's not high on their list. Last year, they needed a backup. They didn't have a backup, but they had so many other needs, it wasn't even on the radar. It's a little higher up the list this year. I think if you're going to go for the good value free agency backup, at that point, you just bring back Hoyer if he wants to come back, because him and Jones clearly work well together. And if you're going for a veteran, it's somebody to work with Mac, and Hoyer's just going to be the best at that.
And we had a comment from Steve Jones also said, they need to be moving Hoyer into the quarterback coach's role. He's been pretty much doing it anyway.
So people pitch that. Why don't they just make Hoyer the quarterback coach? Well, because Hoyer would have to agree to have his salary cut by 10 times. So that the quarterback coaches do not get paid what the players do. So he's not going to just agree to that. But
wasn't there an access thing as well? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. When they were talking about it back at the beginning of the season, how Hoyer would have more access to Mac at the moment as a fellow quarterback than the access he'd get as a quarterback coach. So he could actually coach him better being an actual literal quarterback in the team.
Right. He can go throw with Mac at Brookline High. A coach couldn't do that. That was some of that's CBA rules in terms of practice. A lot of that was COVID stuff too.
Great point, Claire. Great point.
No, it's a great point. Hopefully the COVID element of it though isn't relevant moving forward.
Well, this next question.
Oh, well, no, just to get back to it in terms of the draft, it is a really interesting idea. Like when they had Garrett Gilbert, I thought like Garrett Gilbert could be a guy who could be here for 4 years as the backup, and that job's on lock. Obviously, he's gone now. Maybe they bring him back. There are 2 quarterbacks in this draft I actually like for the Patriots. And I know some people, like I'm texting with Evan, he's not doing quarterbacks this year.
No.
Which, I mean, he half-asses his draft. He half-asses his draft prep anyway. He's not going to watch it. He doesn't watch the kickers or the punters. He takes 2 whole positions off the board. And he talks about being a draft guru. He's not even going to watch Matt Araiza. And he's like the most exciting player in the draft. And he's going to call himself a draft expert. But the 2 guys I like, there were 3. I really liked Will Levis from Kentucky. He's going back to school. The other 2 guys I like, and let me explain this before you freak out at me. Brock Purdy from Iowa State.
Oh, my God. I knew you were going to do it. I knew it.
The other kid's name, I forget his first name. It's Dustin or something, Crum from Kent State. And I'll tell you why. So I will tell you why I like those 2 guys specifically for the Patriots. I just want to make sure it is Dustin Crum from Kent State, who is the lowest ranked quarterback on the consensus big board right now. But here's why. When the Patriots played the Falcons earlier this year, Bill drooled over the concept of Felipe Franks being able to be a backup quarterback, a backup tight end, and cover kicks. So what that tells me is now that he doesn't have Tom Brady, right, and it's not about not taking Brady off the field, he might be into his own little kind of Taysom Hill project.
Okay.
And I thought Will Levis would have been the ultimate guy for that. He's going back to school. But I think Brock Purdy could be that guy. And I think Dustin Crum, wouldn't be the first time they took a quarterback from Kent State and turned him into a player. Right. So I'm not using a top 100 pick on either of those guys. Probably not using a top 200 pick on either of those guys. But it could be an interesting thing where you bring Hoyer back, you bring that guy in. He kind of gives you that Taysom Hill role. And then maybe he can throw a little bit too. Maybe you find out, hey, we're comfortable with him as our backup 2023 and on. So that's how I'd approach that. There's other quarterbacks I don't hate as potential long-term backups. Whether it's a guy like a Bailey Zappi, it would pretty much be the guy for me. But it's not a horrible thought. It's really not a bad idea.
So you're cutting Stidham though?
I'm a big proponent of the teams know more than us, and let's read what they're telling us about the players, right? Mm-hmm. When they didn't turn to him once,
to clarify.
No. But I want to explain it. Sure. When they didn't turn to him once last year, they see him a lot more than we do. That told me a lot about what they think about him, because Cam Newton wasn't great. That was clear. They clearly thought he was significantly better than Stidham,
right? Based
on what they saw from both of them last year. So that's where I'm at with Stidham. He had a chance to win the job once. He really had a chance to win the job twice. Didn't get it. He can get it. I'd rather try somebody else and do it, because I think worst case scenario, right? If you take like Bailey Zappi, if you just want that true backup quarterback, worst case scenario, he's Stidham again. So why not just get ahead on finding the next guy?
There you go. I agree, and I think bringing in any veteran would be detrimental in the fact that it takes so much to bring somebody along in this system that they're not going to help. They're really not going to help. I would stick with the status quo right now. Another big hole that everybody seems to keep talking about is a number 1 wideout. Everybody here is, kind of in the mode that a number 1 wideout doesn't have to be that X or Y guy. It could actually be a Z guy. What do you think of that, Alex? And is there anybody out there on the market that could come in here and perform out of the slot?
Yeah, if Isaiah McKenzie hits free agency, I don't think he will. I think the Bills will probably end up cutting Cole Beasley and bringing him in.
Yeah.
I think I'll take this a little further. I really think the next big thing in the NFL, at least offensively, is that hybrid wide receiver running back. So like Debo, I think Cordero Patterson's here with the Falcons. I think there's a lot of front offices that probably looked at that and said, hey, we want some of that. So Isaiah McKenzie, I believe Jerick McKinnon is on a 1-year deal in Kansas City. He's another guy I'd like to see, but my real answer to this question, you got me giddy now because this is my big draft. The one player I want to draft, Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky.
Ooh.
Converted running back. He was a running back at Nebraska, transferred to Kentucky, became a wide receiver, had over 11,000 yards receiving this year, had over 1,500 all-purpose yards this year. The guy's explosive. The way he gets in and out of cuts. He knows how to move with the football in his hands. He knows how to make guys miss. I think he is probably as close to Debo as we've seen in the draft basically since Debo came out, right? The last 3 years. He's kind of that Kadarius Toney mold. He was a big Toney guy last year too, but he's going to go a little later just because he's a little bit more raw. I would be shocked. I shouldn't say I would be shocked. I would grade him as a first-round pick. Right now, he's projected to go late second, early third.
Yep.
If they can get, and I don't think he solves all their problems because he's a true slot guy. Like you can't line him up outside the numbers.
Right.
But if they could, like my dream offseason, and I think they can make this work financially. How realistic it is, I don't know. Go get Calvin Ridley and then draft Wan'Dale Robinson. And then all of a sudden, if you have Ridley on the outside, Bourne, Robinson, that's you're in business. You're in business with those three guys. Then you have Jacoby in the mix there as well. You find somebody, maybe you do a pick swap. You find somebody to get Nelson Aguilar's contract off your hands. And then again, it frees up that first round pick to take a tackle, to take a corner.
Yep.
I think look, we've seen them go back to back first two picks from SEC schools before. They've done it from Georgia. They did it from Alabama last year, obviously. If they want to do it again, Kentucky, they got a tackle there named Darian Kennard. Kind of looks like a Trent Brown clone.
Yep.
If they want to go back-to-back Kentucky this year, I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't be mad about it.
Massive human being.
In regard to Treylon Burks, because I saw that there, I think, and this is something we all missed, myself included, we all missed big last year in the draft.
Yep.
When we were talking about the quarterbacks of who's better than who and rank them and how good's this guy going to be in the NFL? How good's that guy going to be in the NFL? Well, we miss a lot, and I'm making it my mission this year to really remember this point as we go through the draft for all positions, is that the player's abilities really only it's a little more than half of the equation. It's up to the team that drafts the player to develop that player and use them in the right way. And I think when you look at a guy like N'Keal Harry, for instance, I don't think N'Keal Harry was bound to be a bust coming out. I think a lot of it was he came to a team that really didn't use him to the best of his skill set. Didn't have a true wide receivers coach his rookie year. They didn't do that. Like, look, did he totally fill his end of the bargain? Not entirely, but neither did the Patriots. I think it was just a bad situation. On the same time, people bring up DK Metcalf. Goes on to be like 1,000-yard receiver. If DK Metcalf ends up in New England, is he as bad as N'Keal Harry? Probably not. Is he a 1,000-yard receiver? Also probably not. If N'Keal Harry goes to Seattle, is he an unquestionable bust? No. Like, I think he'll go elsewhere and be okay. I don't think he's going to be great, but he'll be okay, N'Keal. So I think it's nature versus nurture, right? So when it comes to Treylon Burks, I really like Treylon Burks as a player. I really do. Not for the Patriots. Because they don't know how to coach up and use that prototype of player. Because it's the same thing as N'Keal Harry, right? If they want a mulligan on Harry, Burks is the guy. But then they've got to do everything differently.
Right.
And do you trust them to do that? I would rather see them take somebody like Robinson or like Chris Olave, who already plays the receiver position a little more how they want it played. I think Burks would be a good player if he goes to the right spot. I do. It's nothing against him as a player. I just think, again, it's that nature versus nurture thing, scheme fit. He's not a fit here. So I can't get super excited about him specifically when it comes to the Patriots.
Alex, what do you think about John Medici out of Alabama?
Yeah, the Alabama receivers are really interesting to me. Jameson Williams would be my number one for the Patriots if he was healthy. I think he's exactly what they need. Him and Mac love each other, like all of that. I just, in the first round.
No, I'm not taking him in the first.
Right. So my thing is like Mac needs that help now. If you can get them in the second or third and you get another wide receiver, whether it's Ridley, whether it's somebody else in free agency, like fine. Your one wide receiver move can't be a guy who's not going to play this year. As much as I love Jameson Williams and John Mechie, both of them. You know, Alabama's going to have 2 more guys just like that in the draft next year, right? If that's really the guy you want, go get Wan'Dale Robinson, and then Calvin Ridley's in the last year of his deal, and then you can maybe go out and get that guy next year. So, or pair Robinson with Aguilar or whatever. I'd love to see it. Like, I'm an Alabama fan. Right. So the idea that you have Mac and JMO, or Mac and Metch, like I'm all into that. I love that. I just think with the injuries, it's not realistic.
I just think Metch is the guy that can play outside, play inside. If I could get his hands away from his body and get him to start snatching some balls out of the air, I would like him a lot more.
Look, I don't disagree. I don't want to wait a year for it. If they're taking an Alabama receiver this year and it's Slade Bolden, and we just all need to prepare for
that. Brilliant.
Before you ask your question, there's a question for you up here from Joel Shapiro, and I think it was geared toward you, Murph, because it says, "Do you think Brandon Bolden makes the team next year?"
Yes.
In a word, this is going to be the shortest answer ever. It's going to be yes. He's not going. That's not going to take up much of our time, is it? Really?
If Brandon wants to come back, then he plays and he does make the team. There's just going to be too much loss in on special teams in that special teams room. I think Brandon comes back and he's a special teams captain next year. That's just me.
Could you be the special teams coach, maybe? Possibly?
No. Stop. No. All right. What do you think, Alex? You think my man comes back next year and plays?
He had some weird tweet, like joking that he was going to retire, then saying he wasn't, right? Or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. If he wants to be back, I think they'd have him back. And look, I think he showed this year not just what he gives on special teams, but how important that depth is at running back. And, you know, who knows? As much as I'm rooting for James White, that's a pretty serious injury. He's 30. Who knows what he's going to look like? They don't really have another pass catching back. I think we learned this year that JJ Taylor's not going to be that guy. So they could use him the way the way things are kind of projected. They could use him at least for one more year. Again, he's like you said, he's got to want to come back.
Right.
He came back from freaking cancer, man. The dude's tough as hell. So
that's it. He had something to prove this year, and he went out and he proved it. I think this comes down to everybody keeps talking about Tom and Giselle. This might come down to a family matter thing with Brandon too. I have no inside information on this. Don't take it. Murph said, Brandon's wife is telling him not to play. That's not what I'm doing here, people.
Do you think if James White comes back, that makes a difference? Do you think that if Bolden is kind of borderline not sure and White doesn't come back, do you think that tips the scales for him to come back? Because of the role that we saw him play this season. He didn't play James White's role as such, but it did feel like he kind of ticked a couple of boxes that were left absent because of James White not playing.
Right. Yeah. Like you're saying, he's going to get to play more on offense if James White doesn't come back.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought. I think it's on one hand, I agree with you. On the other hand, he's somebody, and every player says this, but he says it very genuinely. I don't really think he cares about what role he plays. Right. And he said, he's like, they can put me out on defense for all I care. So I think he's happy. I think he'd be content just going back to that special teams role. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting one. I think it might. Okay. I'm going to kind of indirectly answer your question. I think it might give the team more incentive to try to bring him back. I think they might push a little harder to bring him back if James White's not back. I think it actually may do more from the team side than from his side.
No, that's fair.
It's a good question. That's a really good question.
Thank you.
So you had a question, Alex, where do you see George Pickens going?
Yeah. Pickens an interesting one. I feel like his stock's very volatile, right? Some people have him as like a top 3 wide receiver. Some people have him in the 3rd round. I think he probably ends up going higher than expected just because it really only takes one team to be high on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as one team's high on him, he's gonna go high. And I think that somebody's gonna really fall in love with what he brings to, and it might be the Patriots. The way he's ferocious, man. The way he blocks, the way he runs with the ball in his hands, he doesn't take anything from nobody. I mean, he'll run right through your face. So the top 3 wide receiver talk's probably a little high for me. I could see him sneaking into the back end of the 1st round. Like, I think a guy like Drake London, I think his stock's going to fall. I think a guy like David Bell, his stock's ultimately going to fall. So those are kind of your fringe late 1st, early 2nd guys right now. I think Pickens works his way into that conversation.
Even with the torn ACL?
Yeah, because he's coming back from it. He didn't tear it in the right. So, I mean, he played in that. He didn't get hurt in the national championship game.
No, he didn't.
So,
he came back and played.
So that's where some of the volatility is like he did just have that, but you're looking at a guy who can at least play versus Mechie or Williams who can't play for a year.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be the thing. Really, it's tough to project the wide receivers because we have no idea where those guys are going to fall. Some people are still talking about John Mechie being a top or Jameson Williams being a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
So I don't think that ultimately happens. You're not taking a guy in the top 10 who's not going to play. But it's really hard to kind of project the receivers right now just because those 2 guys there's 2 of them. It's not like it's just one guy. There's 2 guys who are just total wild cards. So I think that makes it a little tricky.
There you go. One of the issues that I thought that we had this year that a lot of people aren't talking about that needs to be addressed is depth on the offensive line, Bud. What do you think of what we're going to be looking at going into 23? Is this, I was busting EZ's ass the other day that, why are you doing all this? The Patriots going to end up drafting a guard in the 1st round. What do you think? And is there anybody out there coming up in this year's draft that Bill would look at as one of the guys who plays 2-3 different positions that he could grab in the 1st round?
Yeah, I want to pull up my list here so I don't miss any names. I think the depth on the offensive line is an interesting one too, because I think they need to address it in 2 phases. I think it's short-term depth. What's their depth for 2022? And then what's their depth beyond that?
Right.
Their tackle situation is very unclear right now between Trent Brown, who's a pending free agent, Isaiah Wynn, who has 1 year left on his deal, and then is Michael Onwenu a guard or a tackle?
Right.
And what are they going to do with Ted Karras and all of that? So I do think this is a year that they kind of dig in the draft. It'll be interesting to see what William Sherman ultimately turned into, that he's had a year in the system. We didn't see him a ton last year, but I don't know that he was kind of on that level that maybe a guy like a Michael Onwenu was, right? As a rookie. I do like Justin Herron. I think he gives them something. I don't know that I'm sliding him right into left tackle full time. They're going to take, they've taken a lineman. I think it's 10 of the last 12 years or something like that. So they're going to take a lineman. Some of the guys I like, James Empey from BYU is a good interior lineman. You want to talk about positional versatility? I guess I should have started with Cade Mays. Cade Mays checks a ton of boxes for them. He started at both guard spots, both tackle spots. He's also transferred twice. And one of their trends I've picked up on in the last couple of years is they love transfers. And I think that's because, here's a guy who kind of can pick up multiple playbooks.
Yep.
And I think they feel like those guys will learn their system quicker. Maybe there's something to that. So Cade Mays, I had him on my board last year. He ultimately went back to school. And then a guy, Chris Paul from Tulsa. There is a lineman in this draft named Chris Paul. That is correct. Big guy, big kid. Again, has played guard and tackle. He was a team captain. He kind of screams like 5th, 6th round pick offensive lineman for them for me. So he's somebody else I'd keep an eye on. There's some 1st round guys too. I wouldn't rule out them going tackle in the 1st round. Kind of getting ahead of losing Wynn and potentially Brown, et cetera, right? I mentioned Darian Kennard. I really, really, really like him. Jackson Kirkland from Washington is another guy I'm a big fan of. So I don't sleep on the linemen this year. I think this could be a year they take multiple linemen.
Yep.
I have a question, a draft question.
Yeah.
A very important draft question.
Okay.
I know that the Patriots won't take one, so that's fine. This is a personal draft question.
Okay.
What tight end do I need to keep my eye on this year, Alex?
Yes, Claire. And honestly, I'm super glad you asked that because this is a super fun tight end class. And I'm kind of bummed we don't get to dig into it like locally. Yep. Trey McBride from Colorado State is.
I need to write this down.
Okay.
Hold on. Yeah, this is very important for me. I'm sorry, folks, but okay.
Trey McBride from Colorado State is the top tight end in the class. Consensus top tight end in the class. I honestly, to me, I get it. He's good. There's more exciting tight ends. Jalen Weidermeyer from Texas A&M. There's 2 Y's in that. Great tight end name. The guy I'm super excited about, my favorite tight end in this class, that was Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina, local kid. I forget exactly what town he's from, but he's from the Northeast.
Fourth.
Where's he from?
No. I'm just saying I'd love him in the 4th.
Oh, yeah. He's from Cambridge, 6'4", 240, fast guy, very physical player. He can block. Coastal's also just a really fun team, so I really like Isaiah Likely. Charlie Kohler's another one from Iowa State. If you watched, I can't remember what their bowl game was, but I mean, they're driving down the field in their bowl game. He's making big catch after big catch. He looked like Gronk in the 18 title game, the way he was playing. So he's a guy I really like. He's probably a 3rd, 4th round pick too. And then again, I have my list up here. I know there's one guy. Trey Berry from Boston College. Boston College has kind of become a little bit of a tight end factory. So those are a couple names. Isaiah Likely, man, if they didn't spend all that money last year on Henry and Jonnu Smith, Isaiah Likely would be like my guy in this draft. He'd be my draft crush. He'd be the guy I'd be pounding the table for. He's a guy you'll have a lot of fun with.
Okay, because Fremuth was my draft crush last year, and he's turned out to be quite good for the Steelers. I've been keeping my eye on him. So yeah, I just thought I better equip myself while we had you here.
Yeah.
Apologies to any of the watchers that aren't interested in tight ends, because there's probably about 99% that aren't. But I just better just double check and get my research in early. So thank you.
Thing, we're doing all this talk about how they definitely won't take a tight end, so they're going to take a tight end in the top
one.
Right.
Exactly.
Oh, so
there you go.
Exactly.
Isaiah Likely. That's the guy. Enjoy that.
And leave it to Claire to turn our guests into her unpaid interns. It's just beautiful.
I got skill.
Oh man, Steve, you got a question? You've just been asking everybody else's for the past.
Well, that's fine. A lot of these questions I was going to ask, because my next question was going to be about Onwenu. Do you think that this was an outlier year for him? Do you think he has a chance to be a tackle for the team? Because, with Isaiah Wynn's injury history and Trent Brown's situation, in a perfect world, I think it would be great if he could step in and be your right tackle of the future. Then, things are looking up. But, that was going to be my question. And how do you see him moving forward? Was he banged up at all this year? Because his play kind of stepped backwards.
I think it's just unfortunate they keep moving him around. I think it's more a product of that. Like, to me, he's a right tackle. To me, that's his spot. And the other thing is, you basically have to choose between bringing back Trent Brown and Ted Karras, right? And as much as I love Trent Brown, we all love Trent Brown, would you rather have Onwenu at guard and Brown at tackle, or Onwenu at tackle and Karras at guard? Did I say Onwenu at Brown?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, we do.
Basically, I think you get, asset management. What's a better use of the finances? Get back Karras to play guard, have Onwenu play tackle. And honestly, the other thing they could do, this is something I've flirted with. Isaiah Wynn's been good in flashes, but he has trouble staying on the field. He's also not really their type of tackle. I think they tried something different when they took him, but they want those big maulers. I wonder if, Isaiah Wynn's a starting caliber tackle. PFF had him ranked, I think, 32nd, 33rd, something like that, among all tackles left and right. He's only making $10 million, like 10.6, something like that. There's tremendous value there.
Right.
And I almost wonder if you could flip Wynn for a top 90 pick and then bring back Brown and Karras.
Yep.
And then draft a tackle with maybe the pick you get Wynn back, but you get another top 90 pick. Like, I guess my ultimate master plan, and again, I don't know how totally realistic this is. This is kind of just without a ton of research, shooting into the wind here. Trade Wynn for a 2nd round pick. Trade a 2nd round pick for Calvin Ridley. Bring back Brown and Karras. take Darian Kennard in the first round. He gets a year to develop behind Brown and Onwenu at the tackles. Use that second round pick you got back for Wynn to take Wan'Dale Robinson. And now you have Robinson, Ridley, Bourne, Myers as your wide receivers. And then you keep basically the offensive line you had last year, just with Onwenu at tackle, Karras at guard, Brown on the left side.
Wow.
And assuming Brown comes back on a 1-year deal, which is what it probably would be if he's coming back here.
Yeah.
2023, boom, Darian Kennard, Jackson Kirkland, whoever it is that first round pick steps in. So
that's
I'd have to run the numbers by Miguel. And
Yeah.
maybe you can't get a second round pick back for Wynn. Maybe you need to give up a little bit more, but that would be kind of, I have to round out the edges on that. It's not a perfect plan. Here comes all the comments about why I'm wrong, but that's kind of just a general overview of the general path I would take.
Brilliant mad scientist shit right there. Oh my
God. That was pretty cool. I mean, that
was holy shit.
Like there's a lot of ifs in there.
And we'll see now we have this on tape, Alex. So when it comes true, we'll be able to play this back and say Alex had this all along.
Yep.
All the way back in January.
You heard it here first.
Always.
Here.
Yeah.
Always.
Again, there's a lot of ifs in there, but that would be kind of my and then you got to figure out because now you've used your top 2 picks on offense. You still need another corner. You still need a linebacker. But again, I think you can get a guy like the linebacker from Georgia. There's too many names in my head right now.
I really don't know how you do it. I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God.
You get a linebacker like Quay Walker, maybe then in the 3rd or 4th round. I trust them to find a corner late. J.C. Jackson was undrafted, right? Yeah. Or maybe you do that in free agency. You figure it out, and then you go from there. But that's where I would that's kind of my general consensus idea.
Ooh, there's a good question right there. I don't know if Alex can read it or not. Lee Nunes comes in with, are there any college coaches who Bill doesn't trust to draft from? He called Bo Bellini's guys well coached, which I think means are used to getting yelled at.
That's a tough. Are there any coaches? I'd have to think about this. I know this because we're, getting psyched about Jahan Dotson, who's a potential first-round wide receiver. Bill's never taken a player from Penn State.
Never.
Which is weird because Football Factory overlapped with Joe Pa a little bit. You'd think there'd be, and then Bill O'Brien too. Let's not forget Bill O'Brien, his own guy.
Yep.
It is kind of weird that he's never done that. So maybe
there's
that's like, there's something there.
There's something there.
I wish you would have told me this last year.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Saved me so much heartache if you'd have told me that last year.
You've never taken a receiver in the first round until N'Keal Harry. This is the first time for everything. I can't think of a specific coach. I guess that would be the best way I could answer that question is he's never taken a player from Penn State. And there's probably other schools that applies to, but that's the only one I have off the top of my head.
But they, like you said, Football Factory that you've just ignored for 20 plus years. There's got to be something to that. It's got to be something,
especially with O'Brien being there,
right?
Like it's a little weird.
Yeah,
I understand if he doesn't think highly of James Franklin. I don't think highly of James Franklin.
No,
but
no, I get you there. But when you're out there and stumping for your own people to get jobs, and then you just ignore them in the draft while they're there. Not that O'Brien was killing it while he was there, but there were some good players that came out of Penn State that Bill just walked on by. While we're on the subject of coaches, do you think anybody on this coaching staff ends up leaving? I threw out yesterday on Locked On Patriots when they were talking about Tom Brady's leaning towards retirement, that he doesn't want to play for Arians anymore. He doesn't like Arians. He doesn't like his attitude. He doesn't like his lack of preparation, and that Tom might be angling to get Josh down to Tampa Bay. What do you think of that? And do you think anybody on this staff walks?
Yeah, I buy the McDaniels thing. I think Brady is going to give them the ultimatum. It's me or him.
Yeah,
Arians. And by the way, I called this about Arians years ago.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and
he is total.
You go through the quarterbacks he's coached, by the way. He inherited Peyton Manning, who was already good, which, by the way, first overall pick. Then he goes to Pittsburgh as a wide receivers coach. By the time he becomes the OC, Ben Roethlisberger, already established. Then he goes to, I want to make sure I have this timeline right. He goes to Arizona, inherits another first overall pick in Carson Palmer, fails to maximize him. Then he goes to Indy. He ruins Andrew Luck.
Right.
Then he goes to Tampa and he ruins Jameis Winston. So he's been gifted. Every quarterback he's had was either a first overall pick, Brady or Roethlisberger. He has one ring to show for that.
One.
One is Brady. And the one, by the way, and I said this on Twitter because people got mad at me when I said Arians should be fired. They didn't win a Super Bowl with Bruce Arians.
No.
They won a Super Bowl in spite of Bruce Arians.
In spite.
He did more to stop them from winning that game than anybody on the Kansas City Chiefs did. He wanted to go into the half with Tom Brady leading a 2-minute drill in the Super Bowl.
Oh my God.
Anyway, that's another rant for another time. The match with McDaniels is really interesting for a number of reasons. One that I don't think is getting talked enough about is there's really no timer on it, right? It's not like McDaniels is going to go elsewhere. I know there was a whisper about him going to Vegas, but if they want to you think, all right, if you want to make a coaching change in March, that's ridiculous. Well, McDaniels probably isn't going anywhere. If you want to swap Arians for McDaniels, you probably can do that in March. So I think there's something to that. I think it's more he wants a new coach. I think McDaniels would be high on his list, but I think it's more about getting rid of Arians than, getting McDaniels in there. In terms of the rest of the Patriots staff, I'd love to see, I think, let me phrase this carefully. I think Gerard Mayo's a really good coach.
Yep.
He deserves more than he's getting in New England.
Right.
He should go elsewhere. As a Patriots fan, I'd love to see him back because he adds a lot to the team. But as a fan of Gerard Mayo's, somebody who has his jersey hanging in that closet right back there, I'd like to see him go elsewhere and get his due because it's time. And
with at least a DC, on his office door.
But I think he's a really good fit for Miami. He shouldn't go to Miami.
No.
Because we saw what they did to Flores, but in theory, he's a good fit there. He's a really good fit in Vegas. I think Chicago would be really interesting, a really interesting spot for him to land. I'd like to see him gone. I think he deserves more. So that's, whether or not he comes back, I think he's ultimately gone, and that's for the better for him. I also, we all saw the clip of Ivan Fears and Damian Harris. I don't think Fears is going out there chasing a new job, but you see that. It'd be kind of surprising if he's back next year. So they got to figure out the running back coach. I know one of the Ventrone brothers, I always get them mixed up. Ray or Ross was the assistant there this year, but was it? I think it was Christopher Price brought this up on Twitter. Kevin Falk just got added by LSU.
Yeah.
He should be, he did. Yeah. He should be at Ivan Fear's retirement press conference, ready to, ready to step in. It should be like Brad and Danny with the Celtics, right? So that's probably a spot they're going to have to fill. The ones I'm more worried about, though, honestly, are the front office guys, Ziegler and Wolf, because we all know how much of a success the draft was last year.
Exactly.
Those guys were reportedly very involved in it. So, if Mayo leaves, again, I think he's a really good coach. I think they can figure it out. They got a lot of good coaches on that side of the ball. Fears leaving certainly hurts, but you kind of expected it. He's been hinting at this for a couple years now. Losing in the front office, that's tough. That's really tough. So, it'd be interesting to see if they lose those guys who kind of steps in there, because I think they really have something in the way their front office is set up right now.
With the way the draft panned out last year, how much credit you just gave some? How much credit do you give to Nick Caseria not being here?
I try not to punch down, right?
Yeah, I know. Look, but I don't.
He was here. The drafts weren't great. He wasn't here. They had a good draft. I think you look at it that way, and I'll leave that up to other people to decide. Do you want to credit it for the guys who were here or the guys who weren't here? We don't know enough about the inner workings of the organization to totally be able to make that call definitively. But it went a certain way when guys were here, and went a certain way when guys weren't here. So make of that what you will.
Thank you, Chris. That was my next question. Any chance Joe Judge comes back to straighten out this mess of a special teams room?
Yeah, I'd love to see it, as long as they don't make him the wide receivers coach again too. Yeah, they need to do something. I really personally like Cam McCord. Honestly, he's very engaging to talk to. He's very upfront. He truly, truly loves the game of football. You could tell he wanted to teach us. He wanted us to love special teams as much as he did when he talked to us. And I think that's ultimately the most important trait in a coach, is you have to truly be passionate about what you're coaching, to the point where you can't sleep if the guys you're working with don't love it as much as you do. That being said, special teams was a mess this year, and that's on him, and that's just plain accountability.
Yep.
So I almost wish they could keep him as the assistant special teams coach. You're not just going to demote a guy like that. That's not how the NFL works. So unfortunately, it's probably all or nothing. But it probably is time for a new special teams coach.
And before I let you go, and we're talking about coaching, and I know he just got a promotion, what would you think of Brian Hartline coming in here to work with the wide receivers?
Yeah. Give me Brian Hartline, Chris
You
Olave
know,
as a package, man.
right?
Ohio State has just churned out NFL ready. And look, LSU's done it too, but
And I hate Ohio State people for everybody that think I can't stand them. But
I do too.
These two are just, wow.
I think Hartline. So there's two wide receiver factories right now, Ohio State and LSU. The difference is the system the Patriots run offensively is kind of archaic. And I don't mean that in the sense that, some people will tell you it's too slow. It doesn't work in the modern NFL. There might be some truth to that, but the way they design their routes, what they ask their wide receivers to do, very few, if any, NFL teams operate their playbook that way. And there's one college team that does, and that's Ohio State. So part of the reason these guys have so much trouble coming in is they're just asked to play the game in such a different way than they've ever played it. Ohio State is the exception. So I think nobody's going to bridge that gap better than a guy like Brian Hartline.
Thank you. All right. At least we're on the same page there. I would throw Brinkstruck at him to come in here and work with wide receivers. Anybody else?
I think we're right up against our time limit. So Claire, do your thing.
Do we need to ask Alex to tell everybody where they can find him and his great work?
I think you just did that, dear.
Okay.
Follow me on Twitter at RealAlexBarth and 985thesportshub.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for watching and listening, folks. We'd like to thank Alex for his time and his insight and his patience with us today. We have been Steve, Murph and Claire. This has been One Patriots Place, brought to you by e2gsports.com. Tune in next time and go Pats.
Evan Lazar will be here for a rebuttal. Thanks, buddy.
No problem. Yeah, tell Evan my plan and see what he thinks. He'll lose his mind.
He's watching. He's one of the guys in here.
Oh, we'll
He's
see.
watching.
We're gonna discuss it on our show today.